Following months of protest in Ferguson, Missouri, much of the country is on edge as a grand jury decision deciding Officer Darren Wilson's fate is expected any day.
From Boston to Los Angeles, police departments are preparing for large demonstrations. Las Vegas police joined with pastors this weekend to call for restraint when the decision comes.
And in Ferguson, residents are bracing for what could be a dangerous protest if the grand jury chooses not to indict Wilson, who is currently on paid leave. In St. Louis, businesses look to be preparing for a hurricane rather than protest. Windows have been boarded up to minimize damage and deter looting.
There is a lot of anxiety in St. Louis about the unknown. It's kind of like Y2K or the approaching storm off the coast. You don't know exactly what's going to happen.
The grand jury of 12 people have been looking over evidence collected by the county prosecutor's office for nearly 3 months. There are several possible outcomes to the hearings, so let's take a look. The first is that the grand jury could indict Wilson, sending the case to trial. Charges could range from the most severe charge of first-degree murder to a much lighter charge of involuntary manslaughter. From the outside, it's hard to know how much evidence there is against him. Accounts of what happened right before Brown was shot differ drastically. Even some eyewitnesses don't describe the same scene. New details like dispatch audio from moments after the shooting are still being released.
There's several more units over here. There's going to be a problem.
The St. Louis Post-Dispatch also obtained footage of Wilson and 2 other officers filmed about 2 hours after the shooting. They're reportedly leaving the police station and headed to the hospital to get treatment for Wilson after he claims he was attacked by Brown. Both recordings were only released on Friday, so there's likely much more evidence the grand jury has seen that the public still hasn't. That makes it hard to predict whether Wilson will be indicted, and if so, on what charge. Then there's the alternative. Wilson isn't indicted, avoids arrest, and could possibly rejoin the Ferguson police force, though, as the International Business Times points out, his legal troubles would still be far from over.
If he's not indicted, legally, he does have his job. He still would have to go under the review of an internal investigation, which could find cause for him to be fired or not.
Then there are other investigations to consider that Wilson could be subject to. Even if the grand jury doesn't bring charges, the state attorney general still could, and the U.S. Department of Justice could bring its own charges if it finds Brown's constitutional rights were violated. Then there's a whole other legal battle to consider. The officer might have to face Michael Brown's family in civil court.
That would be a civil case where they would be looking for monetary damages for not only wrongful death, guys, but also for intentional infliction of emotional harm based on how they handled Michael Brown's body at the scene.
After the shooting, Brown's body was left face down in the street for 4 hours. Too long, according to Ferguson's police chief Thomas Jackson, who apologized to Brown's family in a video released in late September. The grand jury has until January 7th to reach a decision, but sources close to the investigation say an announcement could come this week. For Newsy, I'm Jasmine Bailey.